A smaller house doesn't always mean a simpler life. You know what's interesting about downsizing? Most people don't actually start with questions, they start with assumptions. They assume they need less space, they assume they'll feel relieved, they assume this next place will automatically feel easier. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes that's where people get stuck. So instead of telling you what to do, I want to walk you through a few questions I think are worth asking before you downsize. The kinds of questions that don't always come up right away but make a big difference later. The first one is this: what problem am I actually trying to solve? Because downsizing isn't always about square footage. Sometimes it's about maintenance. Sometimes it's about finances. Sometimes it's about feeling overwhelmed by a house that no longer fits your life. And those are all very different problems. If the real issue is upkeep, a smaller home might help, but it also might not, depending on what you're moving into. Sometimes you're not eliminating upkeep, you're just changing the kind of upkeep you have. You may trade yard work for HOA rules or simple systems for newer, more complex ones that require professionals instead of quick fixes. Condos and townhomes can reduce physical labor, but they don't eliminate responsibility. You're still managing repairs inside the home. You're still coordinating access, timing, and decisions. You just now have less control over when and how some of those things get handled. And layout matters more than people think. A smaller home with tight storage, stairs, or an awkward flow can actually feel harder to live in day to day than a larger home that's laid out well. None of that is bad. It just needs to be understood. Because if you don't define the problem clearly, the solution can feel disappointing, even when it looks right on paper. The second question is one people almost never ask out loud: what am I afraid of losing? Oof, this is a big one. Maybe it's privacy. Maybe it's space for family gatherings. Maybe it's a sense of identity, because that house that you're living in right now has been your house for a long time. There's a lot of memories there. And none of that is wrong. But if it goes unspoken, it tends to show up later as regret. I've seen downsizing go really well when people acknowledge those feelings early and plan around them, instead of just assuming they'll disappear once the move is done. The third question is a practical one, but it's often overlooked. How do I actually use my space today? Let that sink in and think about it for a minute. Not how you used it 10 years ago, not how you used it when you first bought the house, not how you wish you used it. How do you use it right now? Where do you spend most of your time? What rooms are always in use? Which ones exist mostly in theory? Downsizing works best when the new space supports how you live today, not a version of life that's already changed. That bonus room you had to have when you bought the house, does it still get used? The sewing room that was absolutely needed, or that home office that may have served its purpose in the past, will you need it today? Or do you just like to think that you do? Another important question: is this a one step move, or is this part of a longer plan? For some people, downsizing is the final move. For others, it's a transition, closer to family, closer to services, or closer to whatever comes next. There's no right answer here, but The strategy can look very different depending on whether this move needs to work for 5 years or 15. And then there's this, and I say this very gently. Am I expecting this move to fix something emotional? A new home absolutely can support a better chapter of your life, but it can't do all the emotional heavy lifting on its own. If expectations are too high, even the right move can feel like a letdown. When expectations are realistic, downsizing often feels freeing instead. That balance matters. Now, the last question I'll leave you with is a simple one, or not so simple, because it requires you to do a little thinking. What does better actually look like for me? Think about that. Grab a piece of paper and a pen and write out, what does it look like? It may not be smaller. It may not be cheaper. It may not be simpler, unless those are the things you mean by better. Better might mean fewer stairs or no stairs at all. It might mean living in a neighborhood where there's more walkability and you can walk down to the local grocery store. Better might mean less stress, more flexibility, or just feeling more aligned with where you are in life right now. Downsizing isn't about giving things up at its best, it's about being intentional. And the more intentional you are before you make the move, the more likely you are to land somewhere that actually feels right, not just on paper, but in your day-to-day living. If downsizing is something you're seriously thinking about, I put together a short guide called Downsize Like a Pro. It walks you through the kinds of questions that we talked about here, plus a few practical things that people are often surprised by once they actually start the process. There's no pressure attached to it. It's just there to help you think things through a little more clearly. You'll find the link in the description below. Remember, the goal of downsizing isn't always about smaller, but it is about simpler.